I want to put this into further context for you right now, Dave. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Desmond Ridder has more passing attempts than Lamar Jackson at this point in the season.
Gross.
Yeah.
Gross.
Oh my goodness.
Lamar Jackson has 2 passing touchdowns on the year. Desmond Ridder also has 2 passing touchdowns on the year.
No.
And they both have 1 interception. There we go. So there's a lot of really scary similarities. I'm not
season is
trying
drunk,
to say
man.
that.
This season is so drunk.
Well,
Are you a Desmond Ridder truther over here? Do we have a Ridder truther?
No.
We are anything but.
Well, it's over for some of these players. I think it's time to cut a bunch of players from your roster. Get those roster cloggers off your fantasy team. We're going to go over a bunch of players here that we are just thoroughly disappointed with, and some guys that you just need to say goodbye to. Maybe. We're joined today by Victoria Geary, who is a contributor here at Football Guys. And, well, we're going to hop right into this. But before we jump into this tier list of all the players that we're ready to let go from our rosters, Dave, Victoria, I want to take a look at some honorable mentions that I have here. Some guys that, because there's always someone that's going to complain in the comments or wherever. It's, oh, you didn't talk about this guy. He's definitely off my team. I want to hear your thoughts on these guys. Dave, Kadarius Toney, is he a cut or a keep?
I'm still holding him. When he's been healthy, he's been, the guy seemingly behind Travis Kelce. And then last week we saw him dealing with that toe injury, came in for like the first drive, saw a target, and then we hardly saw him on the field for the rest of the game. So I'm not too concerned about Toney. Obviously the concerns are that he's not going to be healthy, which has kind of been the theme of his career so far, but I'm still keeping him stashed because I don't know, just blinded by that upside.
Yeah, those 3.6 points per game keeping me going. Victoria, I want to hear your opinion here. Allen Lazard, he's averaging just under 6 points per game. That Jets offense has been bleh. Are you holding on to him, cutting him? What are we doing there?
I don't know if we're holding any Jets players at this point. I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later here soon, but I am absolutely cutting Allen Lazard.
That's a professional tease right there, Dave. You see that? That's how we're supposed to be doing it. And then Dave, couple tight ends here. Dalton Schultz, Jawan Johnson, each of them averaging just around 4 points per game. And it's surprising because Dalton Schultz is in that Texans offense that's passing a ton. The Saints have been able to get some fantasy production out of the receivers, but not so much Jawan Johnson. Are you holding on to these guys, especially considering the tight end landscape?
There are like 6 tight ends that I wouldn't cut. Everybody else is just kind of a rotational, work them in on matchups, who's getting hot, who's not. I mean, really, when it comes to these guys, these back-end tight end 1s, high-end tight end 2s, whatever you want to call them, you can cut any of them and just kind of stream throughout the season.
And then the last 2 players here, that are the honorable mentions. And then we're going to get into our tiers here, talking about 2 running backs that were actually getting pretty highly drafted. One of them, who I dubbed the worst fantasy pick of 2023 on our last episode. Najee Harris is averaging 5.7 points per game. It has not looked good for him. He has not finished as a top 36 running back even once this season. And then Samaje Perine, who was expected to really take over the Denver Broncos backfield and hold off Javonte Williams while he rehabs. It has not been good. So there are a lot of players out here that I think we're all ready to move on from. Some of them, there's a tough decision there, right? You have to decide, do I want to hold on to them? Do I want to keep them for the upside maybe later, like Dave mentioned, or are they just simply stashes that are handcuffs? Now,
this
before
is a great show to have, because we spend so much time talking about waiver wire pickups, but we're never talking about the guys that you have to cut from your roster.
Yep.
And we get those questions all the time, like, should I cut this guy for Devon A-Chain, who's still available, or CJ Stroud, who you guys were talking about yesterday? So this is a good show to kind of get ahead of those questions and let you know who you can safely cut off your team.
Yeah, now before we get into our tier number 4 here of players that we're ready to drop, I want to let you guys know that we have our show premiering here on YouTube every day, Monday through Thursday, 4 times a week. And then we've got our audio version of this show on Fridays, where we give you a matchup preview every single week that is exclusive only to the audio version of this show. So be sure to like this video, drop a comment down below with your questions of who should I cut, who should I trade, who should I pick up? And I answer every single one of those questions as they are dropped in the comments below. And of course, as always, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Now, let's jump into tier number 4 here, where it's not pretty, but we're taking a look at a couple of Commanders players. First, let's take a look at Jahan Dotson, wide receiver for the Commanders, who this was a lot of people's breakout player. Dave, You even have a shirt with his face on it.
I am a big purchased for me by a friend. I gotta say, I didn't go out of my way to buy a Jahan Dotson shirt.
Way to hedge your bet right there. I like it. But you know what? I was very much in on the talent for Jahan Dotson too, and I think a lot of us got blinded by that because Washington Commanders have not been good. No Washington Commanders receiver has finished in the top 24 this season in any week. Dotson's best finish on the season, wide receiver 46 in week 1. Next 2 games, they've got Philly and Chicago. Victoria, Jahan Dotson was one of the guys that you brought up here that should be on this list. I want to know your take here because tier 4 is the tier that we are least worried about, most likely to keep these guys. Talk to me about Jahan Dotson.
I'm with you guys. I was with you guys in terms of banking on him breaking out this season. I mean, all the signs were there. The only thing from last season that I kind of forgot is a lot of the games he was propped up by touchdowns, right? So we were hoping that he was going to get more of a target share, which that's really not been the issue here. He's tied with Terry McLaurin for targets with 16 apiece through these last 3 weeks. I mean, albeit they've gone down for him each week. He had 7 in week 1, 5 in week 2, just 4 this past week. 83 scoreless yards. That's a problem through these last 3 weeks. And the touchdowns, again, were his bread and butter last year. And that's when he was finishing in those top 24 finishes. And we thought, okay, we'll see some regression, but maybe in the end zone, but maybe he'll get more targets, all of that. This offense just looks bad through these last 3 weeks. I mean, I had higher hopes for Sam Howell. I had higher hopes all around. I was excited about Eric Bieniemy coming in. You know, the good news, though, I want to flip this here a little bit. Just after week 2, Matt Harmon of Yahoo and our favorite Reception Perception, he came out with a few things he was still seeing in Jahan Dotson's game that gave him hope. One was he was running a ton of intermediate routes. He was cutting up DBs in man coverage at an almost 77% success rate, and he was getting more slot work. In general, his film was still very impressive. But so I'm still holding out hope here with all the new that the Commanders are managing still, the new quarterback, new OC, new players all to mesh together. I'm giving Jahan Dotson a few more weeks until I'm going to drop him.
I'm completely in agreement with. Oh,
same.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, no. I think we're both in the same boat here. I think we both want to hold on to Jahan Dotson because just of the talent. Like it's so hard to put a player like that on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and he's also been leading the team in targets. I mean, he's tied with Terry McLaurin. I think one of the problems is I don't want to make the comparison Sam Howell to Patrick Mahomes. That's not what I'm doing at all. But we see Patrick Mahomes. It's like a joke every single week that he's throwing the ball to like 10 different receivers on any given week and just spreading the ball out. That's kind of what Eric Bieniemy's offense does. And he coached Patrick Mahomes up to play that way. And now we're seeing it with Sam Howell as well. Kind of crazy. But when you look through 3 weeks, Cole Turner, Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuel, these guys all have double-digit targets. So the problem is that Sam Howell is spreading the ball out a ton, but the top of that pecking order is still Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. So I'm not panicking yet. You know, former first rounder, he's going to get his. I'd actually peg him more as a buy low than I would a cut candidate.
To make sure that we also play both sides of this, I know that we all really like Jahan Dotson. I don't think the talent was ever in question here. I think it's who is throwing him the ball and how this offense is going to gel. Right now, Sam Howell's on pace to absolutely obliterate the quarterback sack record in a single season, and not in a good way. So that is really concerning. And then Dave, something you pointed out here, man, like if he is leading the team in targets and it's still not coming to fruition, I think we can hope that maybe things turn around in terms of efficiency, in terms of touchdowns. But right now I'm taking a look at it. Wide receiver 74 on the season while leading his team in targets. So that's still a little concerning, but I think we're all in agreement here. We're holding on to Jahan Dotson, but there's a little bit of fear creeping in here.
We saw the ceiling last year when he was converting like 1 in every 3 targets into a touchdown. And now we're seeing the floor this year where he's not converting any of his targets into touchdowns. So it'll balance. We'll hit that equilibrium eventually. And I think that he's going to make for a fine wide receiver 3 that you can play in fantasy.
We hope. We hope, man. There's no Taylor Heineke walking through that door, so we hope. Let's go on to the other Washington Commander player that we want to talk about here, and that's Antonio Gibson. Dave, you and I have been very vocal about how much we like Brian Robinson. Brian Robinson's been averaging nearly 16 carries per game, and that's actually because this past game, it went down to just 10 carries in a oddly low volume running game for Brian Robinson, and the Commanders got down early. Sam Howell's out here throwing 4 interceptions in a game, getting sacked 10 times, very pass-heavy game script. and Antonio Gibson, the pass catcher, the guy who's supposed to be out here on passing downs, really didn't play a whole lot and has not surpassed 5 touches in any single game. Victoria, I do want to get to you because I know that Gibson is your boy. But Dave, I want to hear you first on this. Is Antonio Gibson just strictly a handcuff at this point?
That's exactly what he is. Yeah. And, getting out carried 47-7 is pretty damning on, his outlook for the rest of the season. I guess if there is a silver lining at all, it's that he saw a season high 5 targets last week. Unfortunately, he just didn't do much with that targets, but we talk about this all the time. I mean, the quickest way for a running back to lose work is to fumble the ball. And through 3 games on very limited work, Antonio Gibson already has 2 fumbles. It's not good. We were hoping that maybe Antonio Gibson could slot in as the pass-catching running back in this backfield. But even there, Brian Robinson is just behind him in targets, but he's doing twice as much with his targets. He's catching them at a higher rate. He's averaging almost twice as many yards per target. Right now, we know Antonio Gibson is talented. He's electric. He can catch the ball. He can do things after the catch. He can do things in space. All of that stuff is really exciting, but I think that he needs a trade or, I hate to say it, an injury to Brian Robinson to really resuscitate his value because there's just not much happening right now.
Yeah, right now, Antonio Gibson's 4.2 PPR points per game has him as the running back 54 on the season. I do want to, at least, that handcuff topic here, right? I get curious, how valuable is that really? Because he's still not seeing the usage now. Could even a guy like Chris Rodriguez jump in and be that sort of banger in between the tackles that it just seems that Ron Rivera loves so much? Okay, Vic, I want to give you a moment here, a moment of silence, a moment of peace, a moment of release, whatever it's going to be, because I'm so sorry. This is where we're at with Antonio Gibson.
I'm sorry too. I am very sorry too. This is just not what I had anticipated for the season. Again, we talked about Eric Bieniemy coming in and talking about it seems every season these coaches are talking about how they're going to utilize Antonio Gibson and put him out in space and do all these cool, nifty things that he's good at. And we've just not seen it. We have just not seen it. 7 total rushing attempts in 3 weeks is absurd. I didn't even think that was the floor here. And the 2 fumbles lost, as Dave brought up already, is just not going to get you playing time, my guy. The craziest part, he's playing a lot of snaps. Compared to Brian Robinson, he's not playing that many less snaps. To see that side by side was crazy to me. But this is a guy we saw in preseason smashing his way into the end zone and being, again, utilized in ways that we anticipated, catching passes, getting out into space. We're just not seeing that. And again, with Sam Howell, as much hope as I had for him this year, it's just, even yesterday, my gosh, costly mistake after costly mistake, albeit against my Buffalo Bills, so I wasn't that upset, but my fantasy analyst self was very, very upset here. So great point, though, in general. How valuable even is Gibson as a handcuff? I don't even think that's a good thing at this point. I'm going to say something radical here in one of my really shallow leagues. I have dropped him. And this is my guy.
My stars.
I know. It's looking pretty grim here. I have a lot less hope for Gibson than the guy we just talked about in Jahan Dotson on this Commanders offense.
So here's the thing too. I mean, so often, we play in these analyst leagues, where you're starting 12 players and then you got 10 players on your bench spot. So you hear drop Antonio Gibson and everyone, but the reality is that's not what every single league looks like. My home league, my favorite league that I'm in, it's a 10-team league with a 5-player bench. So guys like Antonio Gibson are getting dropped, and there's a constant churn on the waiver wire, and that's how a lot of people play fantasy football. So a lot of these guys that we're talking about in this bottom tier 4, we're saying, maybe they're a hold. But if you are in a shallow league, don't feel bad dropping Jahan Dotson, Antonio Gibson, or some of these other guys that we're going to be talking about soon.
Yeah, Dave, we talked about a lot of those waiver wire targets on our last episode. I think some of them are pretty obvious, right? You'd be willing to drop Antonio Gibson for Devon Achane. I feel like that's a really easy one, a simple one. I want to actually take a look at some of the other ones.
But don't drop Jahan Dotson for Ronnie Rivers.
Yes. Context is super helpful. Actually, let's do this. I want to compare it. Antonio Gibson or Rashod Johnson. Who would you rather have the rest of the season?
Jahan Dotson for me.
No, not Jahan Dotson. Antonio Gibson or Rashod Johnson.
Rashod Johnson. I heard Jahan Dotson.
You're like my wife. You never listen to me.
I'd prefer
My work wife,
Roshan.
my housewife, it doesn't matter. No one listens to me. This is why they gave me a mic and a podcast. I need people to listen to me.
I'd prefer Roshan Johnson ahead of Antonio Gibson and Jahan Dotson for that matter.
Okay. And here, this is an interesting one. Victoria, I want to ask you this one because this is a guy that's in a similar role for an equally bad offense. Antonio Gibson or Tajay Spears?
Oof. I'm going Tajay there because that snap count, the injury to Derrick Henry, albeit that offense, woof. And again, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that soon. But oh gosh, yeah, Tajay definitely there.
Yeah, I think that what you're going to see here is a lot of fantasy managers may get scared to drop players, or they may see a guy like Antonio Gibson on the waiver wire and want to go after them because of that name recognition. But it's important to make sure that we get the context here. Tajay Spears is one of those guys who is probably still available on your waiver wire, and he is getting a lot more usage than Antonio Gibson. He looks a lot better in it, and it's a very similar situation. Now, before we move on, I want to remind you guys, we've got the audio version of our show. Every Friday, we're going to be giving you a matchup preview. That's only exclusive to the audio version of this show. You can actually find the link to that podcast in the description down below. And while you're there, it would just be so nice if you leave us a review, okay? It lets us know how we're doing. It's a big support for us. Just let us know. You love Dave's face. You want to see more of his face on the video. That's great. I'll just move myself out of here and we'll just zoom right in onto Dave. Just let us know what you think of the show. Give us your honest opinion. Now let's get to tier number 3, where we're looking at, once again, it's some of those players that have the big time name recognition, but not necessarily the big time production this season. First player on this list, Brandin Cooks, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, who I know that he missed week 2 with an injury, came back in week 3. There are some peripheral numbers here that look okay. 7 targets is fine, but then you kind of look around and you see Michael Gallup had the same amount of targets and Jake Ferguson's getting targets. And it basically kind of just seems like the CeeDee Lamb show at this point, and then everyone else that's involved. And I don't think that everyone expected Michael Gallup to be as involved as he is, and for Jake Ferguson to be as involved as he is. Right now, you're looking at a guy who's gotten 2 receptions in each of his 2 games played. So Brandin Cooks, Victoria, where are we on Brandin Cooks? I don't even know if anyone's going to start him. I don't know that anyone sees a whole lot of upside in this kind of mediocre passing offense outside of CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'm with you here. And that expectation to me was that Gallup has really always been that number 3 wide receiver in the offense. And on the other side of that, Cooks has always produced. He's 1,000 yards, any team he's ever been on and been traded to. He has that talent and the chops to be that wide receiver too for this Dallas team. It's just not happening, like you said. The ball's being spread around way more than I anticipated. I mean, that's the good news, I guess, the 7 targets, as you mentioned, but 17 receiving yards, not going to cut it. 80% of snaps yesterday, that's a good sign. Slightly more than Gallup, but like you said, how much more? I mean, it's really not. The ball's been spread out. All 3, Lamb, Gallup, and Cooks, 7 targets. So we're seeing them spread the ball around. I want to caveat this, though. The Dallas Cowboys season has been a little unusual. It's
been wonky. Yeah.
The start to the season has been weird. Let's not talk about the game yesterday. First of all, it was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, excuse me, on Sunday, but 30 years.
You keep throwing me off, Victoria. What happened to your Monday? You just deleted your Monday you keep saying yesterday. We're recording on Tuesday.
I really wish we could just delete Mondays.
I apologize. It feels like a Monday to me. You want to know why? Because I saw the great Beyonce on Sunday, and that just felt that just felt like I didn't have my Sunday. So I do apologize here, but I'm not quite ready.
That's a very fair reason to be behind the day. I totally get it now.
Right. So I'm not ready to drop Brandin Cooks here yet. We just wonder, I do wonder, 30 years old, is he getting to that age cliff where we start seeing that decline in production? I'm not quite there to drop him yet, but if someone's out there on your waiver wire, I'm not quite afraid to drop him. I'm willing to wait is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think this is one of those kind of depends on your league. In deep leagues, you're still holding on to Brandin Cooks and hoping for the best. In shallow leagues, you can probably cut bait. Alfredo, something you and I talk about a lot on this show is like different archetypes for different receivers. And I don't think Brandin Cooks is that type that we're going to see drastically fall off the age cliff at age 30. He's not a Kenny Galladay type of player where he's taking huge shots across the middle of the field and relying on athleticism. He kind of fits more into that Tyler Lockett archetype where he is an elite separator and he can use his speed to get behind defenses. So Yeah, I mean, this has been weird because week 1, he was very limited, just 39% of the snaps, obviously missed week 2, like you said. And then week 3 was just weird. Like, Dallas could only put up 16 points on Arizona. I'm not ready to completely throw in the towel on Brandin Cooks and write him off for dead. I think that he still could be the wide receiver 2 in this offense. You know, prior to last year when he got injured and kind of checked out on this Texans team, he's just been a 1,000-yard per season machine. So I'm still holding on to a little bit of hope for Brandin Cooks. You know, I'd prefer Jahan Dotson, who we talked about earlier, more than him, but I'm kind of looking at Brandin Cooks as a potential buy low in deep leagues as well.
You know, one of the terms that I think fantasy managers hear a lot, and I think this is a good exercise to put into practice, is roster clogger. And I'm starting to wonder if a guy like Brandin Cooks, the guy with the name value, the guy that's, he could be the wide receiver 2 on the Cowboys. What does that mean, being the wide receiver 2 on the Cowboys? We really don't know this year. Does it mean the same as years past? And I mean, you start to look around, and I think this kind of lends to a game theory conversation is, I think that a lot of people were drafting Brandin Cooks because there was a safety there, right? Like there was an insulation of, he's a 1,000-yard receiver every year, should get the passing volume, right? I think we're seeing that there may not necessarily be that same upside that we've seen in years past. What I want to do is let's take a look at some of these wide receivers we talked about on yesterday's waiver wire episode. And I want to see if you guys would drop Brandin Cooks for any of these guys. So I want to hear first, let's go Brandin Cooks for Joshua Palmer.
I prefer Joshua Palmer, given the Williams injury.
Yeah. Seems simple. Okay. Brandin Cooks or Marvin Mims?
Mims.
That one's closer for me, but...
Yeah? Okay. Brandin Cooks or Tank Dell?
Oh,
Tank Dell.
Brandin Cooks or Romeo Doubs?
I'm going Cooks here, I think.
Yeah, I think I'd keep Cooks there as well.
So
Interesting.
The one thing I'll say, too, is for Brandin Cooks drafters, people who went 0 running back weren't drafting Brandin Cooks, because if you loaded up on your wide receivers and your quarterback and your tight end early, when you got into that 8th, 9th, 10th round, you weren't targeting wide receivers there. So I think for people that have Brandin Cooks, they were probably people that deployed a 0 wide receiver strategy where you do need depth to your wide receiver room. So I think that there's probably a big overlap between people who went 0 wide receiver and people who drafted Brandin Cooks. So, you know, if you loaded up on wide receivers early, there's no reason to hold on to a guy like Brandin Cooks. But if you are looking for that guy who's going to break out and you need to play based on matchups and you're rostering 6 or 7 wide receivers, then I think there is room to still hold Brandin Cooks on your roster.
All right, let's get to our next player here in tier number 3, and it's Treylon Burks, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. Things have not looked good for the Titans, and they've also not looked really good for Treylon Burks, a guy who I think that a lot of us really, I don't say us because I wasn't one of those guys, but a lot of the, let's call them dynasty heads, dynasty managers, were really in love with Treylon Burks, his athletic ability, and I think there was a lot of, hey, AJ Brown is gone from the Titans. Treylon Burks is that next guy to kind of step in and take over that AJ Brown role. We've seen glimpses, we've seen flashes. It hasn't quite happened. And now this year, things are going south quickly for the Titans. It sort of seems like Treylon Burks has become 3rd in the pecking order amongst the wide receivers, not even amongst the weapons on the team, but amongst the wide receivers. He's getting out targeted by Nick Westbrook-Akine, outproduced by him kind of consistently on this Titans team. And right now, the Titans are 2nd to last in passing volume, in pass attempts, for this season. So I don't even know how valuable Treylon Burks really is. Victoria, is Treylon Burks a guy that you want to keep on your team, or is he, once again, one of those roster cloggers?
I'm going with roster clogger here. I would have had him in a higher tier. I'm probably dropping him for a majority of my teams, of course, with that context on your roster. But goodness gracious, averaging 4 targets per game, not going to do it. This offense, you've already mentioned, not going to do it. When do they bench Ryan Tannehill? Honestly, just over 100 passing yards week 3? Like, the Cleveland defense is great, but are they that great? I'm not sure. They're just awful quarterback play here. It's hindering everyone. It's hindering DeAndre Hopkins, Derrick Henry, of course, with the toe injury, but still the entire offense. I'm comfortable dropping Burks. If you want to wait one more week, but I'm not sure, because we know Hopkins was dealing with that injury. He's had a couple weeks now to take it easy, albeit he's played in both games, but he's healing up here. So I just don't see the opportunity even for the starting players. So I can't see the opportunity for Treylon Burks, who's kind of outside of that roster bubble for your fantasy team.
Yeah, the shell of DeAndre Hopkins right now is out targeting him almost 2-1. And I'm going to do the same exact thing that I hate that other analysts do, but 70 of his 99 yards this year have come on one play. And if you look at the 2 games where he hasn't had a big play, he has been a massive liability in your fantasy lineup. 4.7 points and 1.5 points. PPR scoring, we're talking here, for a wide receiver, 4.7 and 1.5 points. That's terrible. You can't have that in yourself. So Derrick Henry doesn't look like himself. Ryan Tannehill doesn't look like himself. Treylon Burks is the number 2 pass catcher on an inefficient run-first team. You know, you want to hope that this first-round draft capital insulates some value here, but I don't think that you're getting any insulated value with Treylon Burks. This team just stinks.
I'm so happy that we made Dave do something that he hates. Yes! Week 4 is awesome. So, I listen, I'm looking at this schedule right now, Victoria, because you bring up how long do they stick with Ryan Tannehill. The Cleveland Browns defense has been very good this year. One of the better defenses against quarterbacks and wide receivers. So it's kind of been a bad move to start any of your fantasy players against them. But Tennessee Titans have a bye week in week 7. If the Tennessee Titans continue on this trend, there's a good chance they are 1-5 after 6 weeks, or even 2-4. I don't know. I think there's a real possibility we see maybe a guy like Malik Willis come in after the week 7 bye. They give him a couple starts, see how things go. And then we could even be talking about a guy like Will Levis jumping in all the way at the end of the season. This might be a big wash of a season for the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry could get traded. There's a lot of rumors going around there. So I would not be surprised to see any of that. Treylon Burks, I don't see the value in him.
Yeah. And the last thing I want to say, there's just kind of a funny observation about the Tennessee Titans. They spent over a decade trying to find this like X receiver, this big freak of nature, huge guy that can kind of do it all. They drafted Daryle Green Beckham. They drafted Kenny Britt. They drafted Justin Hunter. They drafted Corey Davis. Then they strike gold with A.J. Brown, trade him away, and then try doing it all over again with Treylon Burks. Like, you got your guy in A.J. Brown. Why did they trade him? I will never, ever understand what the Tennessee Titans have done over the last, 12, 15 years at the wide receiver position.
Oh, yeah. Let's go from one frustrating wide receiver to another one. We're going to move up to tier 2 in our drop-o-meter here of players that we are willing to cut from our roster. Tier 2, let's kick it off with Rashod Bateman. And this one hurts. I was a big Rashod Bateman fan. Loved his film coming out of Minnesota. He has had every single opportunity to be the number 1 wide receiver on this team. The injuries have been really rough over the years, but now coming back from an injury, we have seen Zay Flowers kind of take over as the top wide receiver on this team. Mark Andrews remains the top target on the team. And even with weapons missing from the backfield, it doesn't seem like it really matters. Rashod Bateman is not becoming that guy in this offense, or just a guy that you can even rely upon. The Ravens right now are 29th in pass attempts. We even just saw last week, he's fallen behind Nelson Aguilar in terms of routes run and targets and production. And he's still 4th in the team in routes run, even with Odell Beckham Jr. out of last week's game. I don't know, man. Like, I have no more hope. I had said this last week. If we went into this game against the Colts and Rashod Bateman could not show out against the Colts, then I think it's time to let him go. And yeah, we're there. I am 100% out on having Rashod Bateman on my team. I don't see the upside right now. I don't see the volume, even that passing attack for the Ravens. We were promised something different. We were promised more volume. It's not happening. Victoria, I'm seeing the look on your face. Have you also been victimized by Rashod Bateman being on your fantasy roster?
Unfortunately, yes. And I was listening to everything you just said, and I think we can pack it up. You hit the nail on every head. I cannot believe that we were promised. That's the part that stuck out to me. We were promised a high-flying aerial attack here from the new OC with Todd, but goodness gracious. It's not like Lamar hasn't thrown, though, right? At week 1, only 22 attempts, but these last 2 weeks, over 30 attempts. But that massive change in philosophy that we expected, it hasn't happened. He's only averaging over 200 passing yards per game this year, so there's not a ton to go around. And to your point already, Alfredo, after losing Dobbins, I would have also expected them to go to the air more often. And with a great matchup against the Colts, Bateman could still not produce. I just have no faith anymore. Zay Flowers is the real deal here. And that's the story here. I'm perfectly fine cutting Rashod Bateman.
Yeah, Alfredo, we talked all offseason about how Todd Monken was going to make this a more vertical passing attack. Through Lamar Jackson's entire career, his career low in intended air yards per pass attempt was 8.3. This year, it is at 6.9. Nice, but not really that nice because it's not great for the passing attack. I'm ready to throw in the towel on Rashod Bateman, and dynasty managers that are watching this show are probably just steaming out of their ears right now, talking about Jahan Dotson and Rashod Bateman and Treylon Burks and all these first-round wide receivers. Like, you want to hope that the value is going to remain insulated with these guys, but it's year 3 for Rashod Bateman now. We haven't seen him put it together. He's kind of like a poor man's version of Gabe Davis on a worse offense. I don't really want anything to do with Rashod Bateman on my rosters.
I want to put this into further context for you right now, Dave. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Desmond Ridder has more passing attempts than Lamar Jackson at this point in the season.
Gross.
Yeah.
Gross.
Oh,
yeah.
my goodness.
Lamar Jackson has 2 passing touchdowns on the year. Desmond Ridder also has 2 passing touchdowns on the year.
No.
And, they both have 1 interception. There we go. So, there's a lot of really scary similarities. I'm not
season is
trying
drunk,
to say
man.
that.
This season is so drunk.
Well,
Are you a Desmond
early.
Ridder truther over here? Do we have a Ridder truther?
No.
We are anything but.
No, I'm trying to show how just the false promises that we were offered here before the season of Lamar Jackson getting more of that passing volume, the offense changing a bit. And obviously it's still early in the season. Things are going to change as the season goes on. There's been extenuating circumstances here where they're trying to revamp the offense without J.K. Dobbins. But I got to say, like, it's not looking good for anyone on that team that's not named Zay Flowers or Mark Andrews. And I think that's where we're at. Let's get to the final guy here in tier 2. And it's a running back that got a ton of opportunity the past couple weeks. A.J. Dillon, running back for the Green Bay Packers, is averaging just 3.7 yards per carry. I kind of made the joke before we started here, like, that's what those quads are good for, man, is get the good yardage, the tough yardage. And we can't even get over 4 yards per carry. He's had just 1 reception in these 2 games without Aaron Jones. And I think that was the thing that has always kind of held us back is, Aaron Jones is going to get the receiving work. A.J. Dillon will get the tough yardage. And now with no Aaron Jones, seemed like nothing really changed. And the efficiency just was not there for A.J. Dillon. Dave, are we done with him? Can we just get him off our roster? If he was not the guy we needed him to be in this open opportunity for 2 weeks on a good Packers offense, can we just get him off our roster?
Yeah, I mean, 5.3 PPR points in back-to-back starts, averaging 5.3 PPR points is just terrible. That's not what you want at all. And yeah, if he can't get it done as a starter, he's probably not going to get it done as a backup. And he was like an efficiency darling as a rookie. He did all of these really exciting things, all the nerdy metrics that I love. He was just crushing in. And now in rushing yards over expectation per attempt, one of my favorite metrics to value a running back's effectiveness, he's 6th lowest in the league. And like, that's the one thing that he was good at doing, is picking up the hard yards and getting more yards than expected. And he's not doing that now. So he is what he is at this point. He's a really big guy with big sexy quads, and he can plunge forward for a few yards, but he just doesn't have the skill set to be a featured back, unfortunately.
Yeah, right now A.J. Dillon just 5 more PPR points than J.K. Dobbins, who has not played since week 1 after leaving with a knee injury. So that's where we're at.
Pour one out.
Victoria, with how inefficient A.J. Dillon has been, do you think that this makes Aaron Jones maybe a guy that people should be going out and buying low right now after missing a couple weeks, and we're seeing maybe A.J. Dillon isn't going to steal too much work?
Absolutely. And we've seen Jordan Love as a serviceable quarterback. I mean, this offense didn't take that much of a dip, a little bit, but yeah, absolutely, we should be targeting Aaron Jones right now as a buy low, I guess. I mean, we've seen who A.J. Dillon is now. He's shown us that he's better served as a complementary back. I mean, you guys have both already said it. If those thighs can't get you the 3rd and 1, then what are we doing here? And 1 target out of Jordan Love's 69 attempts, nice but not nice, back to your point, Dave, in the last 2 weeks without Aaron Jones. Here's the thing. We constantly, these injuries happen, right? Or these backup running backs come in, and we're just, if the opportunity is there and we believe the talent is there, we think reasonably they should produce. But this season, A.J. Dillon just hasn't done it for us. So yeah, it's getting scarily close here to dropping him right off of my roster.
And after we've been hyping up this Packers offense all season, all offseason, need to douse the flames a little bit with some cold water here. A.J. Dillon is the cold water in this offense. We want Romeo Doubs. We want Jaden Reed. We want Christian Watson, Jordan Love, Luke Musgrave, Aaron Jones. But yeah, I think A.J. Dillon is kind of the odd man out in this team.
All right, let's get to tier 1. This, what is it? DEFCON level 5, threat level midnight. This is these are the guys that just you're donezo. You're off the team. You're in our burn book. It's over. I never want to speak to you again.
These are the
First
Sunday
guy.
night spite cuts. Like, you don't even wait until Monday morning. You like cut them from your roster on Sunday, and you're like, never ever again.
You know how much I like alliteration, Dave, and I love that you called them Sunday night spite cuts. Thank you. Sunday spite cuts. That's fantastic. All right, so tier 1 here, we are looking at Joshua Kelley, running back for the Los Angeles Chargers, who, very similar to A.J. Dillon, had 2 opportunities here to go out and be the guy. Multiple weeks here where a lot of people put him as their start of the week and a potential get-right game against the Minnesota Vikings. Dave, I'm going to read these off to you. In week 2, starting for the Los Angeles Chargers, a really good offense. 3.9 PPR points. Week 3, 2.7 PPR points. 2.7. That's only 2.7 more points than me. What is going on, man? This is not what we expect, especially after such a big opening weekend against the Miami Dolphins, going for
15.1 points with Eckler.
I mean, how much of this is just simply that maybe Josh Kelley's not the guy, or is this something that maybe we have to think the Chargers may not be able to run the ball going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line isn't really the problem. I think Josh Kelley is the problem. And gosh, I hate to say this, but this matchup against Las Vegas in week 5 isn't that bad. I mean, if Eckler, maybe you hold on to him for one more week. I mean, it's really, really, really concerning that he couldn't find any room to run against Minnesota, because Minnesota is just a Swiss cheese defense. Every team can run against them, but they were just airing it out. I mean, they couldn't stop the pass attack. So, you know, I'm panicking season long because Josh Kelley has not looked good whatsoever. But if you are like super, super desperate, you know, you lost Nick Chubb and you don't feel comfortable about other guys that you drafted, maybe there could be a week 5 bounce back. But no, I mean, you got to be extremely desperate to think about going back to the well with Josh Kelley this week.
So
Raise your
you're
hand
talking
if
about
you're extremely desperate. Me.
that's, you know what? And I was going to ask, you talk about being extremely desperate. Let's kind of put some context to this. Let's take a look at some desperate running back pickups that are on the waiver wire that we talked about. And Victoria, I'm going to send this to you first. Are you holding on to Joshua Kelley, or are you dropping for Matt Breida?
Oh, I'm holding Joshua Kelley. Yeah.
Dave?
I'm holding him.
I think I'd
You're
prefer
holding?
Kelley over Breida, yeah.
I think I'm going to go Breida there, just for funsies, just for the chaos. All right, here's another one, a guy who could get a spot start this week. Joshua Kelley or Melvin Gordon?
Oh,
Oh,
I'm going
gosh.
Joshua Kelley over Gordon as well. That's going to be like a 4-headed monster once Justice Hill comes back.
Yeah, that
That's-
backfield is muddy. That's muddy.
I don't even know if Kenyon Drake is going to be the guy or if Melvin Gordon's going to be the guy this week. I think I'd go with Joshua Kelley. At least it's a little more clear cut where the work is going.
So you know what? I think I start to lean towards some of these other guys, man. I think I'm very much done. And it's not a spite thing. It's that we've seen what should be the ceiling for Joshua Kelley. No one else getting work. Isaiah Spiller's not in there. They're not really using any other running backs. Austin Eckler could be back by next week. We don't know. And once he's back, it's just a guy that's clogging up your roster. At least here, even with a guy like Melvin Gordon, I can get one good spot start out of this maybe, or Matt Breida, one good spot start. I don't know that I necessarily trust Joshua Kelley to give me even one good spot start. He's burned us twice. I'm not going to keep stepping on the rake here. So I know I'm probably in the minority on that one, but I think I lean just towards getting Joshua Kelley off my roster and going towards anyone that gives me any kind of upside. Now let's get to our final 2 players we have here. This next one, man, how the mighty have fallen. These are 2 names that, I mean, have been staples in fantasy football for quite a bit. Staple might be a strong word, but let's look at Juju Smith-Schuster, wide receiver for the New England Patriots. Dave, you nominated Juju here as the guy that just needs to be dropped from every roster. He's being outperformed right now by Kendrick Bourne. Hunter Henry, for the most part, has also been a big-time part of this offense. The running game is kind
Parker
of
on a per-game basis. Parker missed a game, but if you look on a per-game, he's outperforming him too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all saw this, and we said, okay, Juju's just going to go right into the Jakobi Meyers role. Similar players, nearly identical contracts, and we've seen some decent production from Juju. I think everyone drafted him to be a wide receiver 3. He's not that. He has not been that. Dave, why are you so ready to drop Juju Smith-Schuster from your roster?
I mean, we should have listened to the smoke that was coming out of New England camp in the offseason where they were saying, like, his knee could explode at any moment, or he's not a top 5 pass catcher on this team. But we were just like, yeah, we're smarter than those guys in Foxborough. We're going to draft Juju Smith-Schuster anyway.
I mean, we always hear the argument of follow the money, right? And like, look at the past production.
Money is how you ended up with Kenny Galladay in the New York Giants. It's how you ended up with Juju Smith in the Patriots.
Follow the money. Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
maybe not with the Pats. Maybe
following the money got you Dalvin Cook. How about that for a professional tease? I mean, it's
not wrong.
Yeah, you don't want to follow the money. I think that's what we've learned throughout the years. I was looking at the 8 pass catchers in New England to catch more than 2 balls. Only Ezekiel Elliott has fewer yards per reception. Just not good at all. And it's not like there isn't a lot going around right now. Mac Jones is the 3rd most pass attempts in the NFL. Like, the Patriots are slinging the ball all over the field, just not in Juju Smith-Schuster's way. So, yeah, you can't ignore this. I don't want him in my fantasy lineup. I don't want him on my team. Nobody's going to want him on the trade target. So you start looking at some of those guys that we talked about, Devon Achane and CJ Stroud and Tutu Atwell and Tank Dell. If those guys are available, you absolutely cut Juju without even thinking twice.
Interesting. I don't know that I hate him as much as you do right now. I think I'm going to be in the minority on that again. I'm looking here at the team. It's been a bit of an even share. Man, you know what? I think I would rather have Juju Smith-Schuster on my roster than Brandin Cooks. And I think that might be a little crazy, but I don't know how much.
It's a little crazy. It's a little crazy.
Well, look at the thing. So I look at it this way, right? The Dallas Cowboys, they're going to have their wide receiver 1, CeeDee Lamb, always, right? And so Brandin Cooks is always going to be relegated to that wide receiver 2 position at best. Whereas I don't know. I look at this Patriots roster and they're throwing the ball a bit more. Their wide receiver 1 currently is Kendrick Bourne. I'm not vouching for Juju. I'm not saying go out and get him or he's a buy low or anything, but I don't know that he deserves to be in tier 1. Victoria, you seem to have a different thought on this.
Yeah, I think we're a little flip-flopped on Joshua, Kelley, and Juju here, Alfredo. It's just that the Pats, I forget every season that they are just kind of a headache for fantasy sometimes. Mac Jones, I didn't expect to be spreading out the ball this much or passing this much either, but to assess the Patriots sometimes is tough. I mean, playing behind Kendrick Bourne, the snaps are close, and then you look at the targets, 25 targets for Bourne through week 3 to Juju's 16. 1 reception for 5 yards yesterday, just woof. I don't have the patience here. And you guys mentioning earlier how they cut Jakobi Meyers to bring him in. That just blows my mind. I just wanted to hit on that. Again, same type of conversation with the Titans. You had a guy that was working for you. Why are you cutting him? I don't know. And Meyers is producing over there for the Raiders, so it makes me sad. But yeah, I'm cutting Juju.
I mean, we're still holding on to hope from that glorious year 2 2018 season where he caught 111 passes, had 1,400 yards.
I remember.
That was the same year This Is America by Donald Glover was topping the charts. I mean, we're a long ways away from Juju Smith-Schuster being a fantasy weapon. And we saw some glimpses last year when he was linked up with Patrick Mahomes on the best offense in the NFL, and now he's with Mac Jones on the Patriots. So I just think that we can chalk Juju up as, maybe a decent football player. He can get out there and do some blocking and whatnot, but I don't think that he's going to be fantasy relevant anytime soon.
Yeah, don't twist my words, anybody. Okay, I'm not saying that you need to keep Juju. He's definitely still a cut candidate here off your roster. I'm just saying I don't think he deserves to be in the threat level midnight tier here. Now let's get to the guy that all 3 of us are in 100% agreement. I think fantasy managers are in 100% agreement. I even think the New York Jets might be in agreement. Dalvin Cook, you gots to go, man. This has been, I don't want to say it's a surprise, right? Because I think some people may have seen this coming, that drops in efficiency over the years, the age, the injuries, all that. But Dalvin Cook has been really, really bad for the New York Jets, Dave. I'm taking a look at it right now. 2.3 yards per carry. He has just 58 rushing yards on the season on 25 carries through 3 games. I know that a lot of us were holding out hope. Listen, I live in South Florida. Miami Dolphins fans were clamoring for Dalvin Cook here, and that looks really foolish now after how good Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, and that whole backfield has been. The Jets, I think, have a little bit of buyer's remorse here. I think the whole offense is just struggling. I know it. I'm seeing it. Dalvin Cook, though, is there even the smallest glimmer of hope that he could bring any kind of production, Dave?
Dalvin is cooked. I mean, this is just the
You have been waiting. You have been waiting the whole time. You've been waiting since we started the show to say that.
I've been waiting.
You have it written on a
May.
Post-it.
I've been waiting since May to say this, all right? Because when I pulled Dalvin Cook's efficiency comps back in May, because I said, he still has some of the breakaway runs and the fantasy production was there, but he looked terrible in Minnesota last year. When I pulled his efficiency comps last year, the closest player that I got was 2022 Chase Edmonds. That's how bad Dalvin Cook was last year. His fantasy production was buoyed by the 5th highest opportunity share in the league. Like, he wasn't good last year. He's not good this year. And now, because he's behind a worse offensive line and in a worse offensive system with no threat of a pass game, seeing these loaded boxes, now we're seeing what the efficiency numbers told us last year, that Dalvin Cook is not the player that he used to be. Yeah, you can absolutely cut him. He belongs nowhere near. I mean, I can go on and on. I don't want to just keep, just poo-pooing all over Dalvin Cook.
Well, this is a very positive show.
Here's another. Through week 3, there's only one player who has a worse rushing yard over expectation on per attempt than Dalvin Cook, and that's Cam Akers, who had 22 carries for 29 yards before he was benched and traded for a sack of peanuts. Back since 2018, that's when Next Gen Stats started tracking rushing yards over expectation per attempt. No running back has ever finished as low as Dalvin Cook is currently posting. I mean, the signs of decline were there last year. It's all coming to fruition now. And, if rushing yards over expectation is too nerdy of a number for you, just look at his yards per carry, 2.3 yards per carry. Only Cam Akers, who, like I said, was traded for a sack of peanuts after a 22 carry, 29-yard outing. Only Cam Akers has fewer yards per attempt. It's done. It's the end of the road for Dalvin Cook. You can cut him and not think twice about it.
I think there might even be a conversation here. I'm not saying to cut, so don't freak out, but there's a much bigger conversation we have to have here about the Jets offense in general. Right now, Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook over the last 2 games, just 10 combined PPR fantasy points. That's 2 players over 2 games, essentially 4 games worth of production, and we've got just 10 PPR points. I'm taking a look at it right now. Nico Dowdle
outscored both of them combined last week.
Yep. I was just going to keep saying funny names, but no, you beat me there. You beat Nick Bodden is the most ridiculous name I could have brought up here. Victoria, Dalvin Cook. I don't even have words. Is this done? Like, could the career even be done?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a possibility. Cause if you're not showing, what is he showing here to even potentially have another home, another team next year? I mean, we can't even start our regular Jets starters. Breece Hall is barely getting work. Garrett Wilson. I mean, can we just talk about Robert Saleh and his undying devotion to Zach Wilson over these last few weeks? What does Zach Wilson have on him that he is adamantly not bringing in any other quarterbacks for an evaluation? I'm a Bills fan first, so that's great. Fantasy player second, but I feel for Jets fans and fantasy fans alike that have any Jets players on your roster. Had so much hope coming into the season. Terrible injury to Aaron Rodgers. Do they just chalk this up to a lost season? I mean, Dalvin Cook's absolutely unstartable and unrosterable right now. I mean, again, Breece Hall can't even get the work. I don't know if you guys have seen those quotes from Breece Hall recently within the last week or two of just kind of like being angry about his opportunity share for himself. So there's nothing there for Dalvin Cook. Absolutely. Punt him to the waiver wire.
Aaron Rodgers, yeah. I mean, obviously it's terrible what happened to Aaron Rodgers with the Achilles, but him bringing in all of like his guys, he had been blinded by Dalvin Cook for years in the NFC North, seeing prime Dalvin Cook and thought that was the player they were signing. bringing Alan Lazard over with him, bringing Randall Cobb with him, and now Zach Wilson is in no position where he could possibly succeed. He's like, I've just got all these old dusty vets surrounding me right now. They're like, yeah, maybe Aaron Rodgers could have elevated those guys, but Zach Wilson sure as heck isn't, and it's just bad. Just get Carson Wentz, Jameis Winston, somebody that could just sling the ball around in New York, because Zach Wilson ain't it.
Yeah, I don't want to stray too far away from this, but back to Dalvin Cook here. I'm not even going to go down the list of waiver wire options. Is this kind of one of those
all of them
drop him for anybody, like even a Sean Tucker who's a stash for the Bucks later in the season, just kind of anyone? Is that the point we've gotten to here?
Yeah, I mean, if you need like a second defense, you want to roster a second kicker. Yeah, they're probably all more valuable than Dalvin Cook right now. I'm sure that soundbite will come back to bite me in the butt when he has his random 100-yard game at some point this season.
Good luck, Dave. It's your year. All right. Well, this has been our drop-o-meter, the players that we are willing to cut after week 3. Big thank you to our special guest here, Victoria Geary. We're going to be back tomorrow with our trade targets episode. And as always, a big thank you to our production team, Julia, Dillon, Jagger, everybody on board. You guys make this show go. And a big special thank you to all of you for watching and listening all the way through. We'll see you next time. Adios.